Hello and welcome to Leaders of Tomorrow, India's only daily television platform for small businesses. Over the past 7 years, we've understood what matters most to you, the entrepreneur. And in year 8, we're taking head-on 2 of your most pressing concerns, that of funding and mentoring. I'm Sunanda Jayaseelan. On the show tonight, experts coming in from the philanthropy field, talking about the art of giving back, talking about philanthropy and why it's necessary for you, the entrepreneur, to be giving back and what some of the challenges are and how those are being fixed. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our panel tonight. Let me start first up by introducing Nagma Mullah. She's Chief Operating Officer at It'll Give. We also have with us Shantanu Mishra of Smile Foundation, Pakzan Dastoor, Associate Director at Dasra, and Dinkar Ailavarapu, Partner, Bain & Company. Dinkar, Nagma, Shantanu, thank you very much for all of you coming on our panel here tonight to really discuss the art of giving back and what really one needs to keep in mind when it comes to the movement of giving back and encouraging more entrepreneurs to give back. Pakzan, maybe I can come to you first. We have spoken many times with Dasra in the past, but just to sort of set the context, do you want to tell our viewers very briefly about the work that you do at Dasra?
Sure. Dasra is a philanthropy advisory organization. We've been around for 20 years. And basically, we work with funders to advise them, whether it's corporates or individuals, on how to give their funding more effectively to nonprofits, and then work with nonprofits to actually be able to deploy that funding in the most effective manner, and then partner with the governments to ensure that it's sustainable.
Okay, Shantanu, can you talk to us about Smile?
The Smile Foundation is a national level development organization which works with more than 1 million beneficiaries every year, directly reaching out to. And we work in the subject of education, health, women empowerment and livelihood across 26 states of India.
Sure. All right. Let me come to you, Nagma. If you can talk to us about it, it'll give the foundation, where really sort of the idea for that has come about.
Yes, thank you very much. I work for Edelweiss Foundation. We were created in 2008 by the Edelweiss Group, a very forward-thinking move by a young company. We are grant makers who have chosen right from the beginning to open up our infrastructure, ecosystem, expertise to other funders to encourage anyone and everyone to give to the right place. We give grants to small and medium-sized organizations. Last year alone, we have been able to commit or enable commitment to nearly $12 million. And we are currently funding 43 organizations, but advising many different funders on where to give.
Okay, so let's then talk the big picture when it comes to philanthropy and giving back and what really is going on in India right now. And maybe I can come to you, Dinkar. And, we will break the numbers down to say that, this is what it's looking like perhaps. But sitting where we are, if you can talk about what is it looking like when it comes to philanthropy, when it comes to giving back, when it comes to CSR.
Yeah, so at Bain, we've actually looked at this space for several years now.
Yeah.
So we put out our philanthropy report.
Yeah.
I think we're coming up for the 10th edition of the report in early next year. So, I've actually been a part of several of those. And over the years, I think the outlook's only gotten better. So as in philanthropy in India has actually gotten deeper. And in some of our reports, you'd find out that there's not an age group which actually disproportionately donates. That's actually getting more and more democratic. Younger people are donating more, getting into the space of philanthropy. And neither is it actually a wealth group. So as in the very wealthy, obviously there's a disproportionate share of philanthropy coming from there, but it's actually getting more democratic. I think that's the one thing I would point out. I think in recent times, the CSR law has actually turbocharged the space, at least in terms of the money which is in there. So I think last year, we probably crossed the $1 billion mark in terms of what is the aggregate CSR giving. Obviously, it's a relatively narrow slice of companies who do that. So there's actually money coming into the space as well. I think it's contingent on the space to actually be able to better utilize this opportunity. And I think this opportunity is going to be around for a while. It's not disappearing as we speak, but it's actually about the space catching up to actually, the rules of the game have changed given all of this. So it's about actually making use of this opportunity as we.
Okay, so you're talking about the space and opportunities that exist. Let's perhaps talk about what is the size of the giving which is required to achieve some of the targets. Various reports have spoken about different sort of figures, etc. I do want to refer to what Bain has put out, and this is open to the entire panel. Figures suggesting that you need $60 billion if you are to achieve the self-development goals that have been set. Not even 5 of those, I understand at this point, have the kind of requisite sort of funding which is required of the 17 to 20 that have been set. Where really are the challenges? Open to all of you on the panel. Maybe each of you could pick 1 or 2 things, and then we'll discuss what's it going to take to really change that.
I think sitting where Edelgive is, because we are a funder and we speak to with our peer set, there is I completely agree with Dinkar that it's never been better as far as wanting to give is concerned, but there is a confusion on how, who, where, what. And also there is a slight concern that maybe the volumes I want to give will not be able to be absorbed.
Sure.
So while we are seeing a huge traction in people who want to give and the volumes, we also simultaneously need to see where we're putting this money. So the organizational development along with the program costs are very, very important. Most of the money that is being set aside is for the goals, for the programs. But how does one enable those organizations to breathe and grow and be able to meet the challenges that these crazy problems bring on the table? And so I would say a lot has to do on responsible giving, on inclusive giving, which includes these costs that might not be attractive.
Okay, sure. Would the rest of the panel agree?
Yeah. So I think absolutely to what Dinkar said, right? The forecast is getting better and better. But I think what we need to think, given the numbers and the huge amount of investment that we do need, I think it is about what is a person's potential to give, right? So we talk about, I can give 5 lakhs, a crore, 10 crores, right? But am I giving to my potential, I think, is the question that we need to ask ourselves.
Sure.
And there is no particular formula to that. But I think typically when you have forward-looking philanthropists really looking at it, they will say, okay, I have made a ton of money. If I were to look at my lifetime and take an average lifespan, if I think of all my needs, my wants, my luxuries, my next generation, double it. Now keep that aside, and everything that's left is what I can give off.
Is that the best way to do it?
And that's my potential. I think that's a very strategic way to look at it, and a very thoughtful way to look at it in terms of what is my potential and how much can I give. And if a billion people are able to think of that, of what my potential, and it's a very personal thing, so it's there is no formula to it, and I can't be telling Nagma or Dinkar, this is your potential to give. Absolutely. I think it's for each philanthropist to probably step back and say, what is really the potential to which I can give.
The grassroots organizations and the mother NGOs are also, whether they are really prepared to absorb this kind of giving. And some kind of in an environment where we do not have a comprehensive self-regulation mechanism. So at this point of time, they need a lot of capacity building, and also how they are going to, because impact is becoming very important. While giving is increasing, also simultaneously the people who are getting into this space, who are trying to invest seriously in the subject, particularly to start with the millennials, you see they want impact. They want to actually really see, feel and touch the change that is happening. It's not like an check kind of a philanthropy when you retire you are giving. So under that circumstance, some kind of an serious efforts has to be made with respect to capacity building of the grassroots NGO, community-based organization, and some other organizations.
Okay. Let me also talk about the fact that, as a show that is talking to small businesses. My question is, for a small organization that's watching this interview, let's say you don't have more than 10 to say 20, 30 odd people, but you say that I do understand that we need to give back, I do want to give back. Let's break this up into 2 parts. For the founder or the owner of a company which is so small, what should you be doing if you want to give back? For the employee of an organization which is like this, how do you ensure that you're effectively involved with what is really happening around you?
Yes. So I'll give you our example.
Yeah.
We have 12,000 employees in Edelweiss, and obviously everybody's got a very busy life. It's stressful. As Edelgive, who's supposed to be the expert in this, we're supposed to create a value proposition which enables all kinds of people to give as much as they can, whether through time or through money, without any guilt or without any disproportionate reward.
Could you give us those specific examples?
For examples, for people who really don't want to get too deep into it, who we want to really pull, we would have field visits. We will completely sponsor it. We will take them and their families to orphanages, to schools, to places where they can actually be there and feel what it is to be even a light touch giver of time. And out of them, a decent percentage actually comes back and says, you know, is there something more? And then there's an option too, where if you can give me a couple of hours a week, which could be just 2 or 3, I can give you a problem to solve that would mean the world for them. Like write a one-page pitch, which for you as a person in marketing team would be you know, very easy. For them it's money, and that would be great. And if you really get sucked into it, which is what my purpose is, then I would ask you, can you give me about 5 hours every month, which means you can be a strategic advisor to one of those small organizations, and you can be their buddy, you can be their you know, person to go back to.
All right, do hold that thought. We're going to take a very quick break on that note, but much more when we come back on the other side on the art of giving back in philanthropy. Just stay tuned. Welcome back. You're with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow, and tonight we're continuing this discussion on philanthropy and the art of giving back for you, the entrepreneur. Thanks for joining us. I do want to talk about private funding versus public funding, open to, again, everyone on this panel. And I understand that private funding is outstripping what's happening in the public space when it comes to funding, 15% versus 10%. My question is that a good move? Is that perhaps a reflection of what's happening globally as well? Do you think that, you know, what are your thoughts really on that? Maybe I can come to you first on that then.
Yeah, so I think private funding, we need to have the perspective that it cannot substitute for public funding. I think it's not going to happen. And I think private funding has a few traits which are in the sense that there's a bias and it's actually reducing, but it's about actually making my backyard better, as in donating to the NGOs and the causes which I literally can see the impact of, versus actually investing, or for example, donating to or being a part of the Prime Minister's program to improve the 120 backward districts in India, which is so far away I can't see, touch, feel. So it has, private funding comes with its own little biases which you have to be cognizant of. So there's obviously a world out there where private funding can be done at scale and in a way that you actually solve the big, hairy, unaddressed problems of India. But I think we're getting there. We're not there yet. So
is this what's happening globally? Is this a reflection of what's happening?
So in many ways, I think the Gates Foundation's campaign against malaria and all those things, they're actually examples of private funding trying to supplement, in many cases, if not replace would be a very strong word, but at least supplement what public funding is doing in a range of places. So it is happening elsewhere in the world. But I don't think there's a judgment that it's good or bad. It's just that it comes with its own mix of its own unique mix, which we'll have to deal with.
And another thing behind that headline, I understand, and again, this is open for everyone on the panel. Maybe you know, you could specifically respond to this, Pakistan. But the contribution of ultra high net worth individuals, I understand, has been falling. Right? Is that good? Which means that smaller individuals, you know, smaller companies, organizations, etc., are contributing more. The base is becoming larger.
So I think the conversation here is about not necessarily public funding or private funding or ultra HNIs or, you know, who is giving what, because that as the country grows, I think will take an energy of its own. I think what we need to focus on, and what I think the future is, collaboration. And let me explain why, right? It is not one versus the other, but can we create collaborative vehicles or platforms where, for example, businesses look at what? Risk and returns, right? So how do we reduce how do we reduce the risk and increase the returns for everyone, whether it's private funding, whether it's government funding, whether it's a UHNI, right?
Sure.
And so how do we create, say, for example, Dasra Giving Circles, which bring together, funders, non-profits and governments together to now focus on social issues. So we're not talking about one or the other, but we're talking all three of them coming together to solve certain issues in certain geographies. And that's, I think, what will help us solve the problem.
15% of all the CSR outlays hadn't really been spent, and 15% is a huge figure considering what we're talking about when it comes to CSR spends. So given that that's the context, good move or a bad move?
So, so far it was prescribed, not mandatory.
Yes.
So, given that, I think it's fair what has happened. But what CSR has really done, more than open up the floodgates of funding, is it's brought philanthropy right down in the center of the conversation, in boardrooms where this would never have been possible. I think I would put that as the single largest benefit that this has had, that now people who never really thought of it or for whom it was a side conversation sometimes maybe are having to make it mainstream. It is in your board agenda. It is being discussed by the most important people. It's a fantastic thing as far as that is concerned. On the principle of whether you should make something compulsory or not, I'm a little more, I am of the opinion nothing should ever be compulsory. But we cannot negate the value of this being discussed by the chairman, the CEO, the guys who would have otherwise probably never had a chance.
Sure. Given that you have a bird's eye view really of the picture here in India, I want to give you the opportunity.
Yeah, so I think it's the law, so it is what it is. There's no point in actually revisiting that. But I totally agree with Nagma. I think the good it'll do is probably just started. Because I think the first step is the money. The next step will actually be the capabilities, because it's actually on the agenda. People look at it, and the exposure I've had to private businesses, they will not give money and forget about it. They'll actually try and make sure that it works, as in there's value delivered on the back of that money. So I think you'll actually see progressively there'll be more structured, substantial capability transfer into the sector, which is it's only a good, as in there's no two sides to that.
We're running out of time on this panel, so 2 or 3 things that I definitely do want to discuss. One is there was a brief mention about how the age group of people who are perhaps donating, etc., or giving back, etc., is changing. Maybe I could ask you to first respond to this, Pakistan. Are more and more young people, more and more young entrepreneurs perhaps in a position, are organizations like yourself perhaps tapping more young people now versus previously, and why?
So I think it's both ways, right? And so you have legacy givers who are now increasingly including their families in their giving. So it's not an individual thing to give, just like in corporates, it's not one person sitting there in the CSR. It is the leader who is bringing in the whole board, who is bringing in their senior management. For example, we work with Bank of America, we work with Bain, which actually does a lot of strategy pro bono work with us. So there is a lot of intellectual capability happening, but an inclusion of other people. Similarly, with individuals, it's not just the person who's making the wealth, right? It's usually giving with the spouses, with the children. So folks who are, from 18 to 25 to 30, also wanting to work. So we have a number of young families or children from giving families who actually want to be a part of the sector, will come into a Dasra and say, let me spend the next 5 years actually learning how this whole system works. And that, I think, is more encouraging than anything else, because, one can write a check, but someone who has actually been a student of the sector for the next 5 to 10 years, imagine what they'll be able to do in terms of
the other side of the people question also, and open to everyone on this panel, is that organizations, and I'm sure it's not true of the 3 organizations that we have here on the panel, but that not enough skilled young people want to enter perhaps the social sector. For anyone who's watching this interview, is that changing? How's that changing? Perhaps our salaries becoming more competitive, and therefore is the sector becoming more attractive? I see you're nodding, so let me come to you.
I'm a chartered accountant and I'm here, so I would.
So what did your organization do right to attract you?
No, I think the sector is getting better and better. The quality of the work, and I believe that now the workforce is full of very young, very smart, qualified professionals who are being drawn to what they can do with their expertise. The salaries, unfortunately, are still not You cannot make benchmarks against businesses.
Sure.
But in spite of that, very smart people are working in the sector. We have a team of 23 people, phenomenal people with different kinds of expertise, and everyone from political science to statistics to economics, coming and saying what can we do, and there is a place for everyone because impact is attracting a lot of skills.
Okay, one last question then, and perhaps we can ask between Pakistan and Dinkar if you could respond. Any trends that we should keep in mind for someone who's watching this interview, saying that philanthropy, perhaps this is what 2020 is looking like as we're coming close?
So I think the one thing, and it's a bit of a historic trend which I've seen evolve, and I think it's only a good trend, is I think this little pivot in donors giving on account of guilt versus because of a cause. So in the past, when we first started writing this report, the space was full of guilt giving. I feel I've done well and I'm in India, so I need to give. But that's actually switching to the cause, and I think which drives some of the bottom-up engagement in companies. And so people actually associate with causes, which is a unmitigated good. It gets you loyal donors, non-monetary contributions. And I think that's the trend which probably will continue to play out, and I think it's a good thing.
Okay, Pakistan, let me give you also the opportunity to respond. Are you happy with the sort of culture that we have of giving in India? Do you want to see more change there?
Yeah, I think I'm happy, but not happy enough.
Okay.
Right? I think we would want to see more givers. We would want to see more givers giving more to their potential. But the trend that I really want to talk about, and what didn't exist perhaps say 10, 15, 20 years back, was of the philanthropy industry, right? So if 20 years back I wanted to give, like Nagma was saying, I don't know where to give, there's a trust deficit, who's going to take my money, corruption, etc. Now there is a group of advisory organizations such as Edelgive, Dasra and many others, Give India, etc., whose main job or whose main business is philanthropy, right? We know where the non-profits are, who are doing great work, what's the impact. We vet, verify, build their capacity. We work with them day in and day out to be able to do just this.
Sure.
And so when you're going out and doing philanthropy, engage the folks who
Know their job.
Know their job, right?
All right.
And why, if you're not taking a risk with your investment capital, why take a risk with your philanthropic capital?
Okay, great. So exciting times ahead, and
Yes.
definitely in India when it comes to entrepreneurs and giving back, and just the general trend that we're looking at. Thank you to each of you who's joined us in studio tonight. That wraps up this panel discussion. There's so much more to discuss when it comes to philanthropy and the art of giving back, but unfortunately that's all we could manage to pack into this 20-minute episode. If you have any feedback for us, we're all ears. Our contact details up on your screens in just a moment. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.